The thunderous crash of a crystal wine glass shattering against marble echoes through the Caldwell mansion as billionaire Thomas Caldwell freezes mid-stride, his phone call forgotten. A haunting melody drifts through the air, a lullaby he hasn't heard in 5 years, not since his daughter Emily vanished without a trace. But what happened next shocked everyone who witnessed it. Hush now, my darling, close your weary eyes, sleep will come gently, beneath the starlit skies. The voice carries the same gentle tremor, the same lilting cadence that once filled his daughter's nursery every night. Thomas's heart hammers against his ribs as he follows the sound through the opulent hallways of his Fifth Avenue penthouse, past oil paintings worth millions and furniture that once brought him pride but now feels cold and meaningless. In the drawing room, a young black woman in a simple gray uniform moves gracefully between the antique furniture, dusting each surface with careful precision. Her voice flows like honey as she continues the lullaby, completely unaware of the man standing transfixed in the doorway. Grace Williams had started working for the Caldwell household just 3 days ago, recommended by the prestigious Sterling Domestic Agency with impeccable references. Thomas studies her face, the delicate curve of her jawline, the way her eyes crinkle slightly when she smiles to herself while singing. She appears to be in her early 20s, with natural hair pulled back in a neat bun and skin that glows despite the modest circumstances that brought her to seek employment as a maid. Dream of tomorrow, when the sun will rise, Mama's love will keep you safe beneath the skies. The blood drains from Thomas's face. Those aren't just similar words, they're the exact lyrics Emily used to sing, the ones she claimed she made up herself when she was just 4 years old. Little did Thomas know that this moment would unravel everything he thought he understood about the last 5 years of his life. "Excuse me," Thomas manages to whisper, his voice cracking with emotion. Grace startles, spinning around with wide eyes. "Oh, Mr. Caldwell, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you were home. I can come back later to finish." "No, please don't stop." Thomas steps closer, his hands trembling. "That song you were singing, where did you learn it?" A shadow crosses Grace's face, and she fidgets with the cleaning cloth in her hands. "I'm not really sure, sir. It just comes to me sometimes. I've been humming it since I was little, though I can't remember where I first heard it." Thomas's world tilts on its axis. 5 years ago, his 7-year-old daughter Emily had been playing in Central Park with her nanny when she simply vanished. Despite exhaustive searches, FBI investigations, and millions spent on private detectives, not a single trace was ever found. The case grows cold, leaving Thomas a broken shell of the man he once was. But the real shock was still coming. "Grace, is it?" Thomas asks, trying to keep his voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside his chest. "Grace Williams?" "Yes, sir." She nods, confusion flickering across her features. "Is everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." The irony of her words cuts through Thomas like a blade. He has seen a ghost, or perhaps discovered that his ghost might still be alive. "How long have you been in New York?" "About 6 months now. I moved here from upstate after aging out of the foster system." Grace's voice carries a hint of defensiveness, as if she's used to explaining herself to skeptical employers. "I know I don't have much experience with homes like this, but I promise I'm a hard worker. I really need this job." Foster system. The words echo in Thomas's mind as pieces of an impossible puzzle begin forming. Emily would be 12 now, not 20-something like Grace appears to be, but there's something about the way she tilts her head when she's thinking, the unconscious grace in her movements, the melody that shouldn't exist anywhere else in the world. "Grace," Thomas says slowly, taking another step closer, "do you remember anything from when you were very young? Before the foster homes?" A flicker of pain crosses her face. "Not much. The social workers said I was found wandering alone when I was around 7. No family ever came forward." She pauses, studying Thomas's intense expression. "Sir, why are you asking me these questions?" Thomas's hands shake as he reaches into his pocket and pulls out his phone, quickly scrolling to a photo that's never left his favorites folder. Emily at age 7, gap-toothed smile bright as sunshine, her arms wrapped around a stuffed elephant she called Mr. Peanuts. This decision would change everything for both of them. He turns the phone toward Grace, whose face goes pale as she stares at the image. "Do you recognize her?" Thomas whispers. Grace's cleaning cloth falls to the floor as she takes a step backward, her breath coming in short gasps. Her eyes dart between the photo and Thomas's face, and for a moment, something flickers in her expression, a recognition so deep it seems to come from her very soul. I don't understand," Grace stammers, her voice barely audible. "She looks like, but that's impossible." Thomas moves closer, his eyes never leaving her face. Every instinct, every desperate hope that's kept him alive through 5 years of grief, is screaming that this is no coincidence. The lullaby, the mannerisms, the age gap that could be explained by trauma-induced memory loss or deliberate deception by whoever took her. The silence stretches between them like a taut wire ready to snap. Finally, Thomas finds his voice, though it comes out as barely more than a broken whisper. "Emily?" The lullaby's final note seems to hang in the air like a ghostly whisper as Thomas stands frozen in his marble foyer. His heart pounds against his ribs, each beat echoing the impossible hope rising in his chest. Grace Williams, still clutching her cleaning cloth, slowly turns to face him. Her dark eyes widen at his stricken expression, and for just a moment, something flickers across her features: recognition? Fear? Or perhaps the same inexplicable pull that's drawing them together in this moment. "Sir? Are you all right?" Grace's voice carries a gentle southern accent, but there's something else underneath, a cadence that makes Thomas's breath catch in his throat. "That song," Thomas manages, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where did you learn that lullaby?" Grace's hand instinctively moves to her throat, as if trying to capture the melody that just escaped. I'm not really sure. It's just something I've always known, I guess. Sometimes it just comes out when I'm working." She pauses, studying his face with growing concern. "Did I do something wrong? I can stop singing if it bothers you." "No." The word comes out sharper than Thomas intended, and Grace takes a small step backward. He forces himself to breathe, to appear calmer than the storm raging inside him. "I'm sorry. It's just, that song. It's very special to me." As he speaks, memories flood back with devastating clarity. Emily at 3 years old, her tiny voice stumbling through the words while he tucked her into bed. Emily at 5, humming it while coloring at the kitchen table. Emily at 7, the last time he heard it, the night before she vanished from their lives forever during what should have been a routine visit to Central Park. Grace sets down her cleaning supplies, her movements careful and deliberate. "My foster mother used to say I sang it in my sleep when I first came to her. I was maybe 7 or 8 then, though the memories from before that time are." She trails off, a shadow crossing her face. "They're mostly gone." The social workers said it was trauma-related memory loss. Common in children who've been through difficult situations. Thomas feels the world tilt beneath his feet. 7 or 8 years old. The timeline matches perfectly with Emily's disappearance. But surely this is just his desperate mind grasping at impossible connections. He's done this before, seen Emily in crowds, heard her voice on busy streets, chased shadows that led nowhere but deeper into grief. "Grace," he says carefully, "what do you remember about your childhood? Before the foster home?" Her eyes dart around the opulent hallway, landing anywhere but on his face. "Not much, honestly. Sometimes I get flashes, a man's voice reading bedtime stories, the smell of expensive cologne, classical music playing in a big house." She laughs softly, but it sounds hollow. The therapist said those could be false memories. The mind trying to fill in gaps with fantasy. But Thomas knows that cologne, the same one he's worn for 15 years. The same classical music that filled this very house when Emily lived here. "Grace, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." His voice trembles despite his efforts to stay controlled. "Do you have any official records from your early childhood? Birth certificate, medical records, Anything from before you entered foster care? The question clearly unsettles her. She wraps her arms around herself, a gesture so achingly familiar that Thomas has to grip the newel post of his grand staircase to keep from reaching out to her. The paperwork was all destroyed in a fire at the agency, she says quietly. St. Catherine's Children's Services. They went under about 3 years ago, some kind of scandal with missing children and forged documents. My foster mom tried to help me get copies of everything when I aged out, but... She shrugs helplessly. It's like my first 7 years just don't exist on paper. The revelation hits Thomas like a physical blow. St. Catherine's, he remembers that name from the police reports. They'd been one of the agencies investigated during Emily's disappearance, though nothing concrete ever came of it. The pieces are falling into place with terrifying precision, but he forces himself to remain logical. This could still be coincidence, couldn't it? Grace must notice his distress because she moves closer, her expression softening with genuine concern. Mr. Caldwell, you look like you've seen a ghost. Please, sit down. Can I get you some water? As she reaches toward him, her sleeve rides up slightly, revealing a small scar on her wrist, crescent-shaped, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. Thomas's vision blurs. Emily had gotten that exact scar falling from her bicycle when she was 6, catching her wrist on the handlebar. He'd kissed it better, telling her it would fade but never completely disappear. Just like brave warriors, he'd told her. They carry their battle scars with pride. Grace follows his gaze to her wrist and unconsciously covers the scar. Oh, that old thing. I've had it forever. No idea how I got it. The room spins around Thomas. Every rational part of his mind is screaming that this is impossible, that he's seeing what he wants to see, connecting dots that don't exist. But his heart, his father's heart that has ached every single day for 5 years, knows what his mind refuses to accept. Grace apparently senses the weight of the moment because she moves toward the coffee table where she'd been dusting. I should probably get back to work. Mrs. Henderson will be here soon to check on my progress, and she stops mid-sentence, her voice cutting off so abruptly that Thomas looks up in alarm. She's staring down at the coffee table, her face drained of all color. In her trembling hand is a framed photograph that had been half hidden behind a decorative vase, a picture of Thomas and Emily from her 7th birthday party, both of them laughing as she blows out her candles. This little girl, Grace whispers, her voice barely audible. She looks exactly like me when I was young. Her eyes meet Thomas's across the room, wide with dawning realization and terrible, desperate hope. Mr. Caldwell, who is she? Thomas paces frantically in his study, the photograph trembling in his hands. The image of his missing daughter Emily stares back at him, while across the room, Grace sits in stunned silence, her world crumbling with each passing second. I need answers, Grace. Real answers, Thomas says, his voice thick with emotion. This can't be a coincidence. You have that photograph, you know that lullaby, there has to be an explanation. Grace looks up at him, tears streaming down her face. I don't understand any of this, Mr. Caldwell. I've been in foster care since I was 8 years old. They told me my parents died in an accident, that I had no family left. Thomas stops pacing abruptly. 8 years old? Emily disappeared when she was 7. His hands shake as he reaches for his phone. I'm calling someone who can help us get to the bottom of this. Within an hour, private investigator Marcus Benson arrives at the Caldwell mansion. A grizzled man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, Benson has seen it all in his 20-year career. But even he seems intrigued by the unusual circumstances. Let me get this straight, Benson says, studying the photograph. Your maid just happened to have a picture of your missing daughter, and she knows a lullaby that only you and Emily shared? That's exactly right, Thomas responds urgently. I need you to investigate her background, Marcus. Everything. Her foster care records, the orphanage she came from, medical records, anything you can find. Grace shifts uncomfortably in her chair. Mr. Caldwell, I don't know if I want to dig into all of this. What if we find out things that are better left alone? Thomas kneels beside her chair, his voice gentle but determined. Grace, if there's even the smallest chance that you're my Emily, don't you think you deserve to know the truth about who you are? Benson opens his laptop and begins typing rapidly. I'm starting with the Sunshine Children's Home. That's where you said you were placed, right, Grace? Yes, but it closed down 3 years ago, Grace replies quietly. That's our first red flag, Benson mutters, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Defunct institutions often leave behind messy records, sometimes deliberately. He pauses, frowning at his screen. This is interesting. The Sunshine Children's Home was shut down by the state for falsifying records and improper documentation of children's backgrounds. Thomas feels his heart racing. Could this be the break they've been looking for? What does that mean exactly? Grace asks, her voice barely above a whisper. It means, Benson continues, that the information you were given about your past might not be accurate. Sometimes these places would create false backstories for children to make placements easier, or to cover up irregularities in how they acquired custody. Grace stands abruptly, walking to the window overlooking the garden. This is too much. Yesterday I was just a maid trying to make ends meet. Now you're telling me my entire life story might be a lie. Thomas approaches her carefully. I know this is overwhelming, Grace. But we have to keep going. We owe it to ourselves, and to Emily, to find out the truth. Benson clears his throat. I've got something else here. There's a hospital record from 5 years ago, St. Mary's General Hospital. A young girl, approximately 7 years old, brought in unconscious after what appears to have been a car accident. No identification, no family located. Thomas grabs the desk for support. The timing matches exactly when Emily disappeared. The girl was in a coma for several weeks, Benson continues reading. When she woke up, she had no memory of her past. She was eventually transferred to state custody because no one came forward to claim her. Grace turns from the window, her face pale. I remember waking up in a hospital. I was so scared, and I couldn't remember anything before that moment. They told me I'd been in an accident, that my family had died. Grace, Thomas whispers, his voice breaking. Emily was in a car with her grandmother when they disappeared. We found the wreckage at the bottom of a ravine, but we never found their bodies. The room falls silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. The weight of this revelation settles over them like a heavy blanket. There's only one way to know for certain, Benson says finally. We need to go to St. Mary's Hospital and get the complete medical records from that admission. If this girl is Emily, there will be details that can help us confirm it. Grace takes a shaky breath. And if I'm not Emily? If I'm just some other lost child who happened to end up with her photograph somehow? Thomas meets her eyes with unwavering determination. Then we'll help you find out who you really are. But Grace, in my heart, I already know. You're my daughter. You're Emily. As they prepare to leave for the hospital, Grace pauses at the threshold of the study. Mr. Caldwell, Thomas, what if the records confirm everything, but I still can't remember being Emily? What if I can never remember being your daughter? Thomas places a gentle hand on her shoulder. Then we'll make new memories together. That's what families do. The three of them step into Thomas's car, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the driveway. As they pull away from the mansion, heading towards St. Mary's Hospital, none of them can imagine the shocking revelation waiting for them in those medical files, a detail that will either confirm their hopes or shatter them completely. The sterile hospital corridors felt endless as Thomas and Grace walked side by side, their footsteps echoing against polished floors. Thomas's jaw was set with determination, but Grace couldn't shake the trembling in her hands. Every step forward felt like walking toward either salvation or devastation. I'm sorry, but patient records from that time period require additional authorization, the administrative clerk said, her voice flat and bureaucratic. She barely looked up from her computer screen as she delivered the crushing blow. Those files were transferred to our archive storage facility after the system upgrade 3 years ago. Thomas leaned forward, his billionaire status meaningless in this moment. Listen, this is about a missing child case. My daughter disappeared 5 years ago, and we have reason to believe. Sir, I understand your frustration, but privacy laws are very strict. Without proper legal documentation, I cannot release any information about patients, past or present. Grace felt the walls closing in around her. The hope that had been building over the past few days suddenly felt foolish, naive. Maybe we should just go, she whispered to Thomas. This was a long shot anyway. But Thomas wasn't giving up. Not when they were this close. Is there anyone else we can speak to? Someone who was working here 5 years ago. The clerk sighed, clearly wanting them to leave. Well, there's Mrs. Harold. She's retired now, but she sometimes volunteers in the pediatric wing. She worked here for 30 years before retiring last year. 20 minutes later, they found themselves in a sunny corner of the children's ward, sitting across from a woman whose gentle eyes held decades of compassion. Mrs. Harold was in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and hands that still moved with the practiced care of a lifelong nurse. 5 years ago? Mrs. Harold repeated, her brow furrowing in concentration. That was during the renovation period. We had so many temporary patients because of the construction at the other facility. She paused, studying Grace's face intently. You know, there was a little girl. She came in around that time, unconscious from what appeared to be a car accident. Thomas gripped the arms of his chair. Do you remember anything specific about her? Mrs. Harold's eyes widened slightly as recognition dawned. Oh my goodness, yes. She was maybe 7 or 8 years old, with dark hair just like yours, dear, she said, looking at Grace. But what I remember most was when she finally woke up. She was so scared, couldn't remember anything about herself or how she got there. Grace felt her heart hammering against her ribs. The room seemed to spin as fragments of suppressed memories began surfacing like pieces of a shattered puzzle. She used to hum this little lullaby, Mrs. Harold continued, her voice growing softer. Such a sad, beautiful tune. I'd never heard it before, but she sang it every night before falling asleep. It seemed to be the only thing that calmed her down. The lullaby. Grace's breath caught in her throat as the melody played in her mind, as clear and familiar as her own heartbeat. Thomas was leaning forward now, his voice barely controlled. What happened to her? Where did she go? The poor thing had no identification, no family came looking for her. After she was medically cleared, social services took over. I heard she was placed in the state system. Mrs. Harold's expression grew troubled. But here's what's been bothering me all these years, the dates in her file never made sense. She pulled out a small notebook from her purse, filled with careful handwriting. I keep track of all my special cases, you understand. According to the official paperwork, she was brought in on March 15th. But I distinctly remember it being earlier in the month, around March 3rd or 4th. I remember because it was right after my grandson's birthday. Grace felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. The inconsistencies were piling up, creating more questions than answers. Who was she really? Why were the dates wrong? And most terrifying of all, what if she wasn't Emily after all? Thomas reached over and placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. We're going to figure this out, he said firmly. Whatever it takes. Mrs. Harold studied them both with the keen intuition of someone who had spent decades reading people's hearts. There's only one way to know for certain, she said quietly. But are you both prepared for whatever answer you might get? As they left the hospital an hour later, Thomas had already made the call to arrange for DNA testing. The results would take 72 hours, 3 days that would determine whether Grace Williams was really Emily Caldwell, or if their desperate hope was just another cruel trick of fate. Standing in the hospital parking lot, Grace looked up at Thomas with eyes full of uncertainty and fear. What if I'm not her? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if we're both just clinging to something that isn't real? Thomas's response was immediate and fierce, then we'll deal with that too. But Grace, I need you to know, Emily or not, these past few days have reminded me what it feels like to have hope again. As they drove away, neither could shake the feeling that the next 3 days would change everything, one way or another. The manila envelope trembles in Thomas's weathered hands as he stares at the hospital laboratory's official seal. Grace stands beside him in the sterile waiting room, her own hands clasped tightly together, knuckles white with tension. 5 years of searching, 5 years of sleepless nights and unanswered prayers, all leading to this single moment. Whatever it says, Grace whispers, her voice barely audible above the hum of fluorescent lights, I want you to know that these past few days, they've changed everything for me. Thomas looks at her, really looks at her, and sees something he hasn't allowed himself to see before. The curve of her smile when she's nervous, identical to his late wife Sarah's. The way she unconsciously touches her left temple when she's thinking deeply, a habit Emily had as a child. The birthmark on her wrist, barely visible but unmistakably familiar. With trembling fingers, he tears open the envelope. The scientific jargon blurs together until his eyes find the only words that matter, 99.9% probability of paternal relationship confirmed. The paper flutters to the floor as Thomas's knees buckle. Grace, Emily, catches him, and suddenly they're both crying, holding each other in the middle of that sterile hospital corridor as years of grief and searching culminate in this impossible, beautiful truth. Emily, he whispers into her hair, and she doesn't correct him this time. My Emily. I never stopped looking. I never stopped believing you'd come home. I remember fragments now, she sobs against his shoulder. The lullaby, your cologne, the way you used to read bedtime stories with different voices for every character. I thought they were dreams, but they were memories, weren't they? In the days that follow, the pieces of Emily's lost childhood slowly reassemble. The corrupt orphanage had falsified her records, claiming she was abandoned when she was actually a kidnapping victim who'd suffered temporary amnesia from trauma. The foster families who raised her as Grace had given her love, but never the truth of her origins. Thomas doesn't press for details about those missing years, there will be time for that healing later. Instead, he focuses on the present, on rebuilding the relationship they've both mourned. He shows her the room he kept exactly as she left it, pink walls and stuffed animals gathering dust like a shrine to hope. Emily touches everything with wonder, muscle memory awakening as she picks up toys she'd forgotten she loved. I kept singing that lullaby all these years, she tells him one evening as they sit in his study, photo albums spread between them. Something inside me couldn't let it go. Now I know why, it was you singing it to me first, wasn't it? Every night until you were 4, Thomas confirms, his voice thick with emotion. You made me promise to never sing it to anyone else. I kept that promise. The transformation isn't just Emily's, Thomas finds himself changing too. The distance he'd maintained from employees, the walls he'd built around his heart after losing his family, begin to crumble. He starts really seeing the people who work for him, remembering their names, asking about their families. Emily's years of struggle have given her a perspective on life that money can't buy, and she gently guides her father toward a more compassionate way of living. All those years, I cleaned houses and took care of other people's families, she reflects. I thought I was looking for something, but I never knew what. I was looking for home. For you. The healing isn't immediate or perfect. Emily struggles with identity confusion. Is she Grace, the woman who built a life from nothing, or Emily, the billionaire's lost daughter? Thomas battles with guilt over the years he couldn't protect her, the childhood stolen from them both. But they face these challenges together, attending therapy sessions and slowly, patiently rebuilding their bond. Months later, they return to Emily's childhood home in the Hamptons. The garden she used to play in has grown wild, but Thomas has kept the swing he built for her 4th birthday. As Emily settles onto the weathered wooden seat, Thomas gives her a gentle push, just like he did all those years ago. Higher, Daddy, she laughs, and the sound carries across the yard like music. For the first time in 5 years, Thomas Caldwell's world feels complete. Their story becomes a testament to the power of never giving up, of the invisible threads that connect us to the people we love, even across years of separation and acres of pain. Sometimes the very thing we're searching for is closer than we ever imagined, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to truly listen. If this story has touched your heart, take a moment to reach out to someone you love. Life is fragile, time is precious, and the people who matter most deserve to know how much they mean to you.